2024. Hello everybody and welcome back to the madness that is the nuclear industry. My goodness. My goodness. I'm Dana. I hope you're doing well. You can call in. We're in Canada. It's 709-589-4406. And we have a poll for everyone tonight. Should the world ban all Japanese products, particularly food, to force them to stop growing food in the nuclear wasteland? I don't think that's asking too much, is it? Please stop poisoning us because we want to live. We have a right to be on this planet without being poisoned. Am I racist for saying that? Are they racist for trying to kill us? And Fukushima, if you look at the supercell cyclones, the supercell typhoons, the supercell hurricanes, you see just almost every one is a supercell post-Fukushima. Before Fukushima, during the nuclear testing, you were seeing some of them too. But Fukushima was different. That was a pulse event release. And each building was around 6 million pounds of fuel melted down. It's as if an atomic bomb fell on Mayotte. Widespread destruction after 100. They see widespread destruction after 100-year cyclone pummels the French territory. It's simply not true. They don't have a record. These cyclones and supercell cyclones, typhoons, are post-Fukushima phenomenons. There was not a tree left. This was a cyclone. There wasn't a tree left. The hills, there's not a blade of grass left. It was extraordinary. With sustained winds of 155 miles per hour, 250 kilometers an hour. So gusts can be up to twice those speeds. This was an isolated island already destroyed by the French. Everything the French touches, they destroy anyway. The nuclear industry, right, is destroyed. What it done to the French Polynesian islands was equal to a Nagasaki bomb a day for 12 years. Try to wrap your mind around that statement. The radioactive fallout. Yeah, it wrecked that little tiny island with 300,000+ people. Thousands are feared dead after a devastating cyclone. They say 100-year cyclone. They didn't have cyclones like that 100 years ago, okay? Across the French archipelagos of the Mayotte on Saturday. And it was likened to an atomic bomb. We lost everything. The entire hotel is completely destroyed. People were ripped out of the buildings. Like the tall buildings. Flattened neighborhoods, knocked out electrical grids, crushed hospitals and schools. It was really something. They still haven't reached the majority of the areas. And there's a very impoverished area because, of course, everything the French touches gets destroyed. It's like a war landscape. Thousands feared dead after Cyclone Chido batters thousands. When one media came out today said only 34 people died. We feel completely abandoned. Mayotte residents call for help after devastating cyclone. Another one reported wind speeds, sustained winds of 140 miles per hour, which means you're gusting over 200 miles per hour. There's nothing here on the ground, no resources. We're completely abandoned. Close to 1,000 or even several thousand dead people. Waves up to 8 meters high on top of that, 24 feet. Cyclone Chido leaves Mayotte devastated. Thousands feared dead. The worst storm to strike the island in nearly a century. See, they can't quantify an assertion like that. In 1924, there's no records of the storms that were hitting those islands, for starters. And they want to say the worst storm post-Fukushima, because that's going to give the gig away, right? But it's the worst storm ever recorded, not in a century, but ever recorded. And we see that consistently post-Fukushima. And many areas are still inaccessible. And there's not even a tree left. The hills, there's not even a blade of grass. That's the Fukushima effect, right? A pulse event from 36 reactors melting down. Because each reactor building was full of reactor cores at the top of it. They're still just as volatile as a running reactor. Observers note the cyclone's aftermath could ignite debates about the adequate governmental responses to climate change. You can't just use the word climate change without quantifying it. Climate change is 80 years of emissions from nuclear industry. I have a way of explaining it. It's very subtle. So you got, this is just Fukushima's radioactive fallout model based on venting. It's not based on the actual loss of multiple reactors. It's only based on actual venting. This is based on 31 days when the model stops. And right there is 20 days. And so this is an invisible snowstorm. And instead of snow, it's atoms and man-made atoms. And each atom is pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. And it'll do that forever. And so the 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry, nuclear bombs, nuclear dumping, everything else, the nuclear fuel pools every day, this stuff never goes away, and it's pulsing energy at the speed of light. It kills everything in increments over time, particularly the flora and the fauna, the bacteria, the fungus. And of course, you can count on DW, which is a scumbag media, kills 34. Everybody else is saying thousands. Is climate change behind all the extreme weather events? Or is Fukushima a pulse event behind it? That's the real question. And this is, again, these tropical islands that are isolated, have been destroyed by the industry. They went after all the tropical islands, French Polynesian Islands, Christmas Island, the Marshall Islands, with all the nuclear weapons, right? The Montebello, Maralinga in Australia. With sustained winds of 155. So how fast is that going to gust? How fast does sustained winds? And I can assure you, nobody on the planet has infrastructure with the criteria to build to sustain against a pummeling like this. Right? Our architecture, infrastructure is not built to sustain 100 mile per hour winds, let alone 300 mile per hour gust. That's what we're seeing. So the gust factor, if you look at, like right where I'm to today, at 12 p.m. today, it was blowing 15 kilometers an hour, but it was gusting 32 kilometers an hour. Double, right? Double the wind speed typically. So 155 mile per hour is not a stretch of the imagination to say it's gusting 225 mile per hour or way higher. Right? You get it? France demands nuclear-friendly replacement for Renewable Energy Directive. Of course, the French doesn't even have a government. They had 3 governments were created and removed in 2024. They're working under a 4th one right now. Four prime ministers. And France is exceptionally stupid. They actually have a president and a prime minister. You can't get rid of the president, but you can get rid of the prime ministers. So that's the worst thing you could ever do. That's the opposite of any kind of freedom. That could only go wrong, no matter how hard you try. That is insanity. Hi everybody, hugs for everybody. Hope everybody's doing good. French nuclear tests exposed the entire Polynesian population to radiation, a new study. France demands nuclear-friendly replacement for renewables. So they want to get rid of renewables and replace it with nuclear. Like, that's literally the stupidest thing imaginable. But what's going on, and what the reason you're seeing these connotations show up is because they got rid of the previous government last week, right? And that means that their so-called plan to fund and build 6 new nuclear reactors just got thrown out with the bathwater, because the next administration will look at that. That's one of the reasons they just allocated all this money to the nuclear industry, and the government fell apart because it can't fund that. It's so, like, they use 70% of their fresh water for the nuclear industry already. There's around 1,000 senior citizens die every summer because all the water is directed towards the nuclear industry during the droughts. France said it was time to bring nuclear power into the centre of the EU decarbonation policy. Well, France's energy is 70% nuclear on top of that. And it's been nothing but a nightmare. EU law, which EU should never exist, that has been instrumental in boosting wind and solar power deployments in 2009 should be replaced with one that recognizes nuclear power. And so, because some lobbyists is able to influence the media to put that narrative out there, that don't mean it's a smart thing to do. And you can't call nuclear clean. It's absurd. It's truly the most resource-intensive industry in history. There's nothing out there that uses more resource than the nuclear industry. And it takes forever to get these things up and running, and then they pollute the environment for 50 or 60 years with hideous amounts of radiation, and for hundreds and thousands of years because you can't get... The fuel is still splitting atoms. Long after the reactor and civilization is gone, the fuel is still splitting atoms all day, every day, and there's no way to contain it. That's released directly into the environment. And what we're talking about is invisible snowstorms from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide every day released into the environment that you can't see it or smell it. And the censorship on me is really something, isn't it? They're absolutely terrified that somebody's having a conversation or somebody's honest. Being honest terrifies the industry. But last night's video was, what did they get, 130 views? Really? 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 On a show I've been doing for a decade. France must clean up the Algerian nuclear test site. The legacy of France, of the contamination that they caused, is absurd. And they're demanding more nuclear. They have no way of producing it on top of that. Be a nuclear family. I mean, my Geiger counter up there is in real time. That's real time. And that's absurd numbers. 158 counts per minute right now. 320 there earlier. These are absurd numbers. 185 counts per minute, 193 counts per minute. 185, by the way, is an evacuation zone at a nuclear plant. So I should abandon my home here if we were going on pre-Fukushima numbers. Because they just kept raising the limits. Oh, well, now this is safe. And now that, oh, well, they released a massive amount that contaminated everything on the planet. So let's increase the safe numbers. I mean, this is the evilness of this industry is legendary. Humanity, the future that's managed to make it through this nightmare, will despise us, and particularly the nuclear industry. They're disgustingly, pathetically revolting the nuclear industry, the pro-nuclear community. It's truly pathetic, right? Constellation Energy has launched America's first residential nuclear energy program in Washington, allowing households to power their homes with 100% clean nuclear is not clean. But every story you'll see the word clean over and over and over in desperation to manipulate you and coerce you into regurgitating an absurd narrative. It's absurd to in any shape or form conflate nuclear with clean. It's absurd. And it's despicable. It's a despicable thing to do. It's a cowardly thing to do too. Fukushima fuel rods were melting 75 minutes after the tsunami. The reactor core was not covered with water 10 minutes after the station blackout, after they lost power. So that means it melted down right there on the spot. As soon as the fuel rods are exposed, the cladding, when it hits oxygen, will catch fire and burn at 1800 degrees. And that'll ignite the plutonium, uranium pellets inside of it that are covered by zirconium cladding. And they'll burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And that will flash the water. The water will just boil off immediately, and everything else now will burn. And it doesn't matter if it's underwater, it'll burn. It doesn't need oxygen to burn. Once it starts, once the chain reaction itself starts, it doesn't need oxygen. So it'll be a chain reaction underwater. It's not going to matter. Deep into the earth, in the China Syndrome, wherever. Worker, before explosion, Unit 1 filled with what looked like steam or dust. A series of loud bangs, noises never heard before. Well, Unit 1 detonated. And Unit 3 in particular. They got no footage of Unit 4 for some reason. Well, here's Reactor 1 to your left and Reactor 3 to your right. Right, the explosions. Now, right alongside of Reactor 3 was Reactor 4. So which is worse, Reactor 4 or Reactor 3 looking? Now, the buildings need 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks, 1 million gallons per minute. So it's equal to 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks driving past you every minute. And they got to dump their water into reactors each minute, 1,440 minutes a day. Or they go, boom! And so officially, this never happened. Officially, Reactor 4 wasn't destroyed. Officially, 150 feet above this stump, this 40-foot stump, they got the fuel out of the pools in 2013. I mean, why would you lie like that? Because you don't want to be blamed for an extinction event, right? The pilot program offered electricity at 11.99 cents per kilowatt hour, lower than current local utility rates. Well, this is desperation, eh? It's just another Ponzi scheme they're setting up. And nuclear can't exist without huge subsidies from the government, which is slash the taxpayers. Constellation nuclear facilities achieved a 94.4% capacity factors in 2023 with their clean generation fleet. Like, you can't call nuclear clean. And this, in desperation, about 6 years ago or so, they started using the word clean in nuclear constantly. Avoiding 125 million metric tons of carbon emissions each year. I always marvel at how despicable people can be. And so nuclear is the spot to be when you marvel despicable things, right? Da, 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 da. Hang on, I got the one for you. So they're worried about the carbon emissions, are they? Well, we got the cure for that fella. So a single container ship produces more emissions than 50 million cars. 15 of the world's biggest ships create more pollution than all the cars on the planet. So when they talk about carbon emissions annually, if you want to bring those numbers down, you want to go after the shipping industry, because there's 90,000 ships on the ocean at any given time. So when 15 produces more pollution than all the cars on the planet, 90,000 is equivalent to having over 4 trillion people on the planet every day. And like, you should despise them for trying to hoodwink you by using those connotations. And when these melt down, you just need one plant to melt down, not the 8 fuel pools at the top of the buildings, each building that is also missing. Just one of these reactors is enough to change the male-female population of every species worldwide. More males than females, which is less species, right? But it's enough to cause, like the nuclear testing in the 70s, that's when you've seen the cancer epidemic show up. But it's also directly related to Alzheimer's and dementia and Down syndrome and autism, diabetes. Like it compromises your immune system, right? And then everything else goes kabunk. One nuclear energy stock to snag now before the 127% upside potential. And what it is nano nuclear energy needs cash. And they just robbed who knows how many millions of investors last month, right? Stocks crashed. New York-based Nano Nuclear Energy is an early-stage advanced small modular reactor. There is no early stage. It doesn't exist. There's 100 companies out there with a small modular reactor design, and every one of them are different. Because nobody can, after 80 years, nobody still worked it out. What makes you think they're going to work it out? And the current generation are capable of designing something new. All their designs are based on an 80-year-old design, producing cheap, small, and safe portable energy solutions. Well, Nano is not producing anything. They don't have a product. They even acknowledge that. They need a significant amount of cash resources. The best way is to trick people into investing in a company that doesn't have a product. Everybody needs a significant amount of cash flow. But it shouldn't be on the backs of people that have worked all their life, right? And that they're going to steal their money and they're never going to be able to get their investments back. And they ended with a cash balance, the quarter, of almost $14 million, double last year's $7 million. But with no revenue coming in, the cash burn rate is expected to be substantial. And this is why they're pushing the stock, because they need money. And they don't have, you need a lot of money. You need billions of dollars to bring any of this to fruition. They don't have that. So they're simply just stealing the investors' money. That's the only way that's how come they got $14 million this year in the fourth quarter, right? Is they're stealing investors' money. And this is a pump and dump scheme they do every 3 or 4 weeks. The small modular reactors are just revolting maggots, this industry. They're revolting what they're doing. Martial law fiasco casts doubt over Korea's nuclear power push. This is so fun. I love this story. So now that the former prosecutor, now prime president of South Korea, who, when he got elected, his first day he went to a nuclear power plant and stood in front of it and announced a nuclear renaissance. But because he was losing power, and he called for martial law. And so now that the next administration is not pro-nuclear. They're just going to overturn everything He overturned the previous administration, which was anti-nuclear. And it goes, we've seen this all over the world, all these dictators. South Korea's embrace of nuclear energy has been thrown into doubt as the President Yoon impeachment case raises the possibility of the opposition coming to power and overhauling the nation's broader energy strategy. And that's the new, I think that's the new Prime Minister, is it? I can't remember. I know, like we've covered Yoon a lot. I hate him. He said Fukushima didn't even happen, right? Yoon was suspended from office because of a botched attempt to impose martial law a week and a half ago, was it? His push to build caused riots in the street, and only lasted for like 16 hours. And then the parliament in South Korea wouldn't go along with it. His push to build more reactors at home and ramp up exports of South Korea's nuclear technology is at risk of stalling. No, it's not at risk of stalling, it's stalled. Stocks related to the nuclear sector, people are bailing out of their stocks, has already suffered losses due to souring investor sentiments since the political crisis began. Well, we knew this was going to happen at some point because Yoon is a dictator, right? He's a former prosecutor, federal prosecutor in South Korea, and he was a terrible prosecutor. He was a political prosecutor, and he tried to prosecute the previous administration who were pulling the plugs on nuclear plants. He actually went after them. And then he got elected, and then he tried a nuclear renaissance, which, of course, they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the supply chain. And investors were hoodwinked into investing in it. And now they're losing their life savings. Successive governments have been criticized for dragging their feet or adding more renewables like solar and wind. What about geothermal? How come geothermal don't get any love? I'm missing the headline for that story. A Poland nuclear plant project has raised 22 billion sterlings. It's absurd. They're going to need another 10 billion on top of that. And you're talking about Poland now, so Poland, you can imagine the corruption over there. We see this constantly, right? With they get money from Canada, the American International Development Financial Corporation, the U.S. Export-Import Banks. I mean, this is clearly a Ponzi scheme going on there. Poland is not going to be building no reactor. UK, and the price they're talking about is absurd. UK reacts to death of the Russian general heading nuclear troops. We will not mourn him. And they got a picture of Stupid, the current idiot prime minister. And so just before the show went live, I was reading through a few headlines where they were saying the Russian general who's at the head of the nuclear troops, he was assassinated. And they said it was by a scooter, an electric scooter. There was a bomb planted with an electric scooter. And they were showing pictures of an electric scooter and debris, right? An electric scooter was in perfect shape. So to suggest that the bomb blew up everything, buildings and everything around it, a big hole in the ground and everything else, killed a general, but it didn't cause any damage to the scooter is absurd. It's just the industry, it doesn't know how not to be evil, see? The British government has reiterated that Ukraine has the right to self-defense against Russia. Illegal war. But it was Boris Johnson that pushed the war from the UK. And it's NATO who is supplying Ukraine. Russia's not going to war against Ukraine per se. It's a proxy war with NATO. And Russia has the right to defend themselves. I mean, they're using 1 million of Eric Schmidt's former Google CEO drones each month in Ukraine. They strap a bomb on it and they chase down conscripted victims that were put in the uniform. And then they chase them around with these drones till they get too tired, and then they run in and bomb them. I mean, and they're getting so good at it now. it's absurd. Like, the whole story is absurd. There's no future because of that technology. Everybody's going to be chased down and killed by a drone at some point, except for them, I guess. As the Prime Minister, and of course, like the United Kingdom's new Prime Minister is a moron. He's just a moron. And there's millions of people signing I can't remember what you call it anymore. A poll to have a referendum to vote him out. He wasn't elected, he was appointed, right? All UK Prime Ministers are appointed by the monarchy, right? And you imagine how nutty Prince Charles actually is. He had 155 servants growing up. He still did until he became the king, right? 155 servants. You got any idea how disconnected you are from reality when you have 155 people groveling every day to you? It's absurd, right? That someone like that is even allowed to exist anymore. It is Russia's aggression that is causing this conflict and ongoing suffering of the Ukrainian people. No, they have, like, this was a scam to cause inflation worldwide. Right? You see, and so they banned all the commodities from Russia, gas, oil, coal, gyprock, and everything else. And then you never had a way to replace it. And the only way they can replace it was by jacking the prices triple and quadruple. And it went in line with the nuclear industry too, right? And the inflation now, like, I know people can't afford to pick their kids up at school. They pull their kids out of all sports. They can't afford to pay for that anymore. Only the wealthy can afford it now. And UK Prime Minister Starmer announced new sanctions against 20 tankers that illegally transported Russian oil. He didn't come up with the list. Somebody in his administration gave him a list, and he had during a press conference told the media, right? He's not the brains behind anything. His job is to shake hands and get a picture taken. He's the useful idiot. My dad used to be a president of a major organization down here. And he quit that job to become the secretary. And we were out on the boat one day, and I asked him, he said, okay, what's up? I said, nothing. He said, come on, what's up? I said, well, how come you're the secretary? Why aren't you the president anymore? Because everybody loved having you as the president. And he said, well, because the secretary does all the work. All the president does is shake hands. So he said, I'm doing a much better job. He said, things are happening because I'm the secretary. And I got it. I understood exactly what he meant by that. This is hilarious. Indonesia to build 20 nuclear power plants with first project by ThorCon. That's the right word to put on the name of these companies, is a con. I can assure you, Indonesia is not going to be building 20 nuclear power plants. And that the reactors they're talking about building, I'll get to it in a second, is pushed for net zero, which is a paper by Miles Allen. I'll bring it up for you. Miles Allen wrote a paper, Net Zero. And maybe a bit off more than I chew here. Let me see if I can find it right quick, though. Yeah, here we go. I really dislike him too, Miles Allen. The physicist behind net zero. So United Nations, which is a military-industrial complex with 195 militaries, grabbed this paper, gave him a cushy job at Cambridge, and then utilized this paper to bludgeon humanity with. And they don't have any authority, but they have incredible influence. with the first project expected to be awarded to the U.S. nuclear developer ThorCon. Well, they're not a developer. They haven't developed anything. So why are we calling these companies developers when they haven't developed a single thing? They don't have a product. They don't have a piece of land to build it on. They're not trying to build it. They don't have an application into any of the regulatory agencies. They're decades away from even building a prototype. It's late, and what it is about, it's about them raising money, right, on speculation. But you're looking at 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road before you're going to make any money back. It's slated to deliver a prototype reactor by 2028. Well, first off, you got to get an application into the regulatory agency. They're going to take 300 or 400 people, and they're going to have to go through 1 million pieces of paper, through all the engineering papers. They're going to find flaws. They're going to have to send that back to the engineers. Like before it ever comes, before they even get a stamp to go ahead and build a prototype, you're talking 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 years. So suggest that you're going to build, and they do it all the time, suggest they're going to have a prototype reactor by 2028 in 4 years, when they don't even have a site. They don't have the funding. They don't have an application into the regulatory agency. They don't have the license. They don't have the design of a reactor, and that their narrative is based on a thorium molten salt reactor, and there was no small modular thorium molten salt reactor. Indonesia pushes for low carbon nuclear energy, and they keep using these connotations of low carbon, right? But they can't quantify that. They can't win a debate and show their evidence calling it low carbon, and have someone like me there with the evidence saying, well, clearly that's not low carbon, because I can denounce any of with the documentation. Nuclear energy is seen as a viable solution to meet the country's substantial low-carbon energy demand. Like, they can build 20 geothermal plants in 2 years. Have everything up and running and get on with their lives in 2 years. That technology now is matured, right? We can do it anywhere on the planet, but we refuse to even acknowledge that it exists, because when you do, that's the end of nuclear, gas, oil, coal, and the idiotic moron small modular reactor narrative. Utilizing a thorium molten salt reactor. The only ones they built was the Rico Fermi and Santa Susana's. They melted down, right? And the one at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, they all melted down. And 500 megawatts is not a small modular reactor, by the way. That's a huge reactor today. Calling it low carbon when it's the most resource intensive. And thorium is a byproduct of the tin production process. So they're going to, again, a thorium molten salt reactor. They did build one, right? But it's not a powered reactor. It's not for making electricity. The prototype reactor will be built by South Korea. No, it won't. South Korea, the so-called nuclear renaissance, just went booby. Just went, oops, D-daisy. It's not clean, it's not low carbon, and it's not coming to fruition. They don't develop a small modular reactor. Yeah, there's 100 companies out there, right, that are begging for $1 billion each. And they're getting it too. None of them, and I mean none of them. And the ones that did allegedly have an application into the regulatory agency, what happened, like NuScale and the rest of them went babooey. It didn't slow them down though, from scamming again, showing up 2 weeks later. It's a despicable people. These are despicable people. There's zero other ways to describe the pro-nuclear community outside of despicable. With remarkable renewable energy accounting for 75% of nuclear power is going to make up 5% in the next 15 years. Like, they're desperate to increase the nuclear anywhere. Anybody says we're interested in nuclear, the International Atomic Energy Agency, Ralphie Grossi, will go down and stick his head right up their arse and stay there like he's at home. Micro or small modular reactors. Like geothermal holds 1,000,000,000 times more potential than something that doesn't exist, okay? And how many times have we covered geothermal in the comparisons of nuclear? We've never covered it. We've been doing this show nonstop 5 days a week typically for over a decade straight. That's why I got so many people on my show every night, right? See, 19 people. You don't got 19 people watching hockey or baseball. Only I can get that many people together at one time. Micro or small modular nuclear reactor. Like if you took all these nuclear scientists and put them on a big fucking hamster wheel, you produce more electricity than you ever will with a small modular reactor, because they don't exist. Can't call them a small modular reactor until they actually exist, okay? So stop me right now. I'm going to hunt you down and kick the shit out of you. There's all kinds of pro-nuclear. They're now running in their closet. Mommy, make them stop. Should Iran attack Israel's nuclear plant? By Michael Rubin. Should Iran attack Israel's nuclear plant? Well, Iran says that they're going to attack Israel or retaliate for Israel's attack before the Biden administration leaves, because the Biden administration is the one that gave Israel all the weapons, right? And the monetary and satellite feeds and everything else. And so they're going to attack them. And it's not going to be... they pummeled them the last time, right? Their military... They only attack military infrastructures, unlike the scumbag Israel. The stupid moron Israel. They're like, let's face it, these are morons. And Iran, if Israel attacks Turkey's nuclear plant, for instance, they want the whole region to attack them. That's part of their prophecy with the Torah and the Talmud, right? So when I read this story, I wrote down in the description below, should Iran attack Israel's nuclear plant? I think they should. Don't get me wrong, I'm the last person that wants to see a nuclear plant go catch fire or be attacked. And Israel has already attacked multiple nuclear plants over the years, right? Iraq and Syria is naming two. And Israel just went down to attack Iran last month, and when the Americans planes, because Israel can't build a plane, when planes Israel leached out of the American military, because that's all they are is leeches, right? They got painted up by Russian radar that Iran has. I can guarantee you Iran has Russian nukes down there. They have small modular nuclear bombs. That's the only thing that actually exists in modular. Just add more tritium to make it bigger. Should Israel knock Turkey's nuclear plant offline? 15 years after Turkey signed an agreement with Russia to cooperate on the construction of a nuclear power station? I mean, imagine what kind of weasel Michael Rubin actually is. Really, though, imagine what kind of weasel that creature that pretends he's human actually is. Can you imagine what kind of degenerate that person actually is? Well, this is a fun story. Dr. Michael Rubin, he spent time with the Taliban. He's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, the director of policy analyst at the Middle East Forum, a former Pentagon official. So he's a war hawk. He's just another despicable war hawk. Nuclear bunker sales increased despite experts warning they aren't going to provide protection. Well, if you're deep underground, you're better off than the people that are at the surface, as long as you can, your air supply is not destroyed. Global security leaders. Again, these are not leaders, right? At all, are they? They're the useful industry for the military-industrial complex. That's who dumb people are. Fungus in Chernobyl nuclear disaster zone is mutated to feed on radiation. It's not mutated to feed on radiation. Like, media is despicable, aren't they? What it is fungus will aggregate radiation. It doesn't use it to produce energy and grow into a big radioactive monster. It simply doesn't work that way. It does, however, have a lot of tolerance, and it does aggregate the radiation. But the way the stories are written, of course, is the fungus is adapted to convert gamma. What about alphas? What about neutrons? What about betas? What about the X-rays? Created by the interactions of all of those into chemical energy. I believe none of that stuff. I got a study you might want to believe, though. The transfer of Chernobyl-derived cesiums and iodines from flowers to honey and pollen. And if you're wondering where the bees are gone, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. It's 80 years of emissions from the nuclear idiot machine. All of Japan is contaminated. The government is covering up enormous exposures to the public, and the epidemic has just begun in 2013. We are, in fact, dying in Fukushima. And what happened to us will soon affect all the Japanese people. There was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Because it's not like a banana, it's not like a potato chip, it's not like walking in the sunshine. The quinsand plants is set to increase production of isotopes with the Yttrium-90 to China. This stuff is, again, right, the nuclear medical industry is a genocide machine. Solar nuclear projects to be the cheapest. This is Japan. Get a load of this one. Solar and nuclear projected to be the cheapest energy source in 2040. You know why? Because the electric grid is not designed to accommodate solar and wind power. And they're not going to change it. It's like they have 2 gigawatts of solar right now that's offline because they can't get it into the into the grid. It's on purpose, right? It's on purpose. It's always on purpose. Woo! No deaths from Fukushima, but how will Singapore gain acceptance for nuclear energy? 7 people died on a single shopping street in 1 year by 2012. On a single street in Fukushima City, or Koriyama City, rather, sorry. And every house in Koriyama is entitled to be decontaminated from radiation, but you can't decontaminate a house, or a building, or a business, or a school, or a mall, or anything else. But if you listen to the apologists, over and over and over, we see these connotations. No deaths from Fukushima. Extreme increase in mortality caused by cardiac diseases in Fukushima. The death rates might give the creeps to some people. Cesium, by the way, immediately damages the heart muscles. Report indicated 5 Fukushima workers most likely received a fatal dose. But when you listen to the media, no deaths from Fukushima. Worker died while decontaminating in Fukushima. Another Fukushima Daiichi worker dies when repairing a cover for Unit 3. Japanese medical experts are deeply concerned about the children's radiation exposures. 51% of the kids contaminated with cesium-137 at Fukushima Hospital. Some had clothing indicating high levels of gamma radiation. If your clothing is heavily contaminated, then you breathe an absurd amount in, right? So my heart goes out to the victims and my contempt for the nuclear industry. Radiation health specialists, children with over 11 atoms a kilogram start to see heart problems. No deaths from Fukushima. Japan's cancer showed 865,000 excess cancers in 2012. And cancer is not the only illness or disease or autoimmune deficiencies or injury from radiation, right? But 865,000 extra cancers in the first year, like that screams catastrophic emergency if I ever heard one. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. No deaths from Fukushima. Japan bid to ease Hong Kong nuke fears. Habuki Tashaki, chief professor of mechanical engineers at the City University, said the amount of water discharge will be 1 drop per month to the Pacific Ocean. So only 1 drop per month is going to get out of Fukushima. Well, that's a relief. I don't know about you, that makes me feel better. I was kind of worried because when you look at the buildings, it don't look like there's anything left. So if there's only 1 drop a month, I don't know what the big whoop is about. Clearly nothing got out of these 2 buildings. Remember, there's 4 of them. Unfortunately, what he's saying is one drop per month. This is a professor of mechanical engineering. And the report by the International Atomic Energy Agency released this month was scientifically recognized. 1 drop per month. So the International Atomic Energy Agency says nothing got out of that till August 24 to 2023 last year. Despite the fact that the plumes covered the planet over and over, many different isotopes are recognized in different plumes, right? This was 1 million by the French government now, mind you. 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of cesium-137, which pulses energy 600 feet every second. There was another study based on Japan's numbers of that plume model up there of Neptunium-239 is based on 20 days. The plutonium-239 dispersal is also based on 20 days. But the models are not based on the meltdowns. They're not based on the lost inventories, the reactor cores, and the fuel pools. They're based on venting. And no deaths from Fukushima. So they just get out there and they got all the media will lick their bums and they'll just regurgitate the narrative. Nuclear energy, why not? That is the response from an expert on why Singapore is exploring it. The radioactive releases from Fukushima did not kill anyone. So every time I hear that, I'm nothing but contempt. That's Dr. Chu's research, which is not research, is it? The United States seen plumes of not just the americium or neptunium, not just the plutonium, not just the cesium-137, for instance. The radioactive sulfur peroxide, hydrogen, buckyballs, these are very hot particles. Tends to concentrate in the testicles of Californians where they've done the study. Well, imagine what's happened to the insects, the birds, the mammals, the animals. And why ain't we talking about the females? I got a dry throat, man, all day. Going on for like a week now. Today's pretty rough. Xenon at 450,000 times above detection levels in Washington and persisted for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks / months and months and months / years. The plumes never stopped coming out, right? This is 5,500 miles away. These are, you just can't, like, you can't have just xenon. There's 1,000 other fission products are going to be in that plume and that plume and that plume and that plume. and this plume and those plumes. Because the building's actually melted down. I don't know if anybody realizes that. It did not kill anyone, but thousands of workers at coal mines die every year, says Dr. Alvin Chu, a senior fellow. Again, whenever you hear the word senior fellow, you're talking about the worst human conceivable. Dr. Chu's research, what research? He refused to acknowledge that anybody died, that there was any harm whatsoever. He's really one of the worst humans conceivable. When you compare nuclear to airline industries, whenever you hear that, these are people that should lose their degrees. He'll get honorary degrees for doing this, for being a scumbag, but they should lose their degree, shouldn't they? But people are still flying. And the horrors of a nuclear disaster like Chernobyl and Fukushima appear to have scarred mankind. To go nuclear is not as a highly polarizing topic in many countries, only because scumbags like Dr. Alvin Chu exist, right? Because they put all the propaganda out there. To gain the public's trust on nuclear energy in Singapore, Dr. Alvin Chu emphasizes the importance for authorities to explain a country's need for nuclear energy. Well, I mean, that's perfect. Like, Singapore is a nasty spot for nuclear, by the way. Educate the people about radiation safety and also ensure the population prepared for a worst-case scenario. Well, I thought there was no worst-case scenario. If Fukushima is not a worst-case scenario, what is? Why are they such disgusting parasites? And why isn't the police arresting these people? Because it's not illegal to poison you with radiation, Dana. Oh. I mean, Rafael Grossi should be nailed to a cross and put up in Times Square, and then everybody should have to throw an egg at him when he walks past him. Most of the time, the best form of protection is to stay home, shut the windows, and wait for authorities' instructions. That's the very last thing you want to do. Whatever way the wind is blowing, when it comes to if the nuclear plant's there and the wind's blowing this way, you need to go that way or this way. You need to keep going for hundreds and hundreds of miles. And don't look back and don't come back. Staying there and breathing it in is the worst case scenario. I despise these people. These are not people anyway. These are monsters. And if it was a crime to poison with radiation, we'd be making endless documentaries about this evil people. The authorities, the worst people in human history, have been exploring advanced nuclear technologies such as small modular reactors that are promised to be safer. Yeah, and geothermal exists and is safer. Nuclear can never be safe. The small modular reactors are going to be using plutonium mixed oxide fuel. And when you scale up a small modular reactor to the large reactor, the inventories, the small modular reactors are going to produce 5 times more fuel itself, fuel rods. And there's going to be nasty fuel rods. There's going to be plutonium mixed oxide fuel rods. This is hideous stuff. And it's going to produce 35 times more high-level waste and 30 times more intermediate-level waste. There's nothing good about this kind of waste. Just because you call it medium-level or intermediate-level waste, because you're comparing it to the actual fuel rods, if you take the fuel rods out of the equation and they didn't exist, this is high-level waste now. They have so many tricks up there. When they call it a decay, it's not a decay, it's an explosion. A Becquerel is not a decay, it's an explosion. Almost at the speed of light. That's an explosion, right? No deaths from Fukushima. This was the interview. I listened to it and had to go get a bucket so I can puke. But more deaths from coal mining. It's absurd to suggest there's more deaths from coal mining. And the contempt I have for this person is absolute. Evacuation is not the best protection. Yes, of course it is. Radiation doesn't leak. You can't call radiation a leak. Like the most dishonest people are the nuclear community. The most dangerous cranks are the nuclear community. Like a leak covering the planet in 19.5 days, 468 hours. Everything on the planet is being attacked with radiation. There's no species on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against radioactive fallout. Every nuclear plant fuel pool is hemorrhaging radiation. There's 1,000 fuel pools each of them making a plume like this each day. And a much bigger plume than that each day. And that plume is based on venting from Fukushima, right? Why small modular reactors are suitable for Singapore. Like, what are you talking about? They don't exist. There's no factories, there's no supply network, there's no applications into the regulatory agencies for licensings. It's a non-existent. It only exists in the ether, not even on a piece of paper. They don't have an actual design, so you can't say it exists on paper. It only exists because there's a lot of money to be made in being a scumbag and a monster and a serial killer, which is what a pro-nuclear is. They're serial killers. Letter, and this is Atomic Insight, Rod Adams, truly one of the worst humans ever created, who's now a venture capitalist, believe it or not. He used to work at a nuclear plant as an engineer. Now he's got billions of dollars to throw around. This is an old one, 1995. Letter from the editor / Rod Adams. Other countries progress while the United States lagged behind. No, the United States wasn't lagging behind. They're still the biggest producer of electricity with nuclear. My name is Rod Adams, and I am a nuke. Don't be disarmed by the fact that he sounds stupid. He is, but he's a very busy stupid. I am proud to claim the title that I am a nuke. I'm proud of what I've done to earn it. I am a nuke. I've been fascinated by nuclear energy for as long as I can remember, the little nuke tart said. My father was an engineer with Florida Power and Light, a utility that built 4 nuclear plants when I was growing up to be a little nuke. We often discussed this exciting new technology. I learned enough from him to know I wanted to know more. And now I am a nuke. And I am Rod Adams, a nuke. Rod is one of the scariest people I ever come across. He went to a Navy academy, so never got in. He applied for entry into the Navy's well-respected nuclear submarine program. Admiral Rickover accepted me, even though I had majored in English. What does that tell us, I wonder? Let's move ahead to 2013. Anti-abundance is common link between anti-GMO and anti-nuclear. He's pro-GMO too, right? He said there's a common link between anti-nuclear and anti-GMO. GMO is nasty stuff for your health, and so is nuclear. But he supports anything that makes him wealthy, right? That's how he got his wealth, is he supports anything that kills puppies and kids and everything else. That's Rod Adams, because Rod Adams is a nuke. Is nuclear energy gaining momentum? So I was reading this story, and I immediately realized that this sounded an awful lot like Rod Adams' safety concerns, and the question of what to do with radioactive waste have dampened enthusiasm for a technology once seen as a revolutionary source of too cheap to meter. Now there's much talk of renewable driven by tech giants like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, saying that they're going to have small modular reactors, but there is none. Just because, like other players in the last number of years have come out and said they're interested in small modular reactors, and this artificially inflated the nuclear stocks for small modular reactor companies which don't have a product, and then everybody 2 weeks later have to sell their stocks because they just lost most of their life savings. There's not much talk. This is a coordinated assault upon investors. It's a Ponzi scheme, right? And it's only talk. A decade ago, it looked like a global nuclear industry was in irreversible decline. Well, it still is. But Microsoft, Google, and Amazon announced investment in the sector as well as increasing pressure on rich countries to curb carbon emissions. Well, you can't, again, this is about promoting nuclear. And if you're paying attention, you'll run into this all day, this narrative. It's everywhere all day. All you got to do is read the nuclear news cycle 24 hours, and you'll see this just trying to bludgeon every human on the planet. The propaganda. When commercial nuclear power was first launched in the 50s and 60s, governments were seduced by its seemingly endless potential. No, they weren't. They were taken over by this secretive organization to generate electricity for millions of homes, which was a byproduct to trick people and lull them into complacency, right? A kilogram of uranium can produce about 20,000 times as much energy as a kilogram of coal. If you took a kilogram of uranium that's gone through a chain reaction, and everybody on the planet had to walk past it, there would be no humans left when the last one walked past it. That would be the end of humanity. You can take that kilogram of used uranium to another planet and find billions of people and kill every one of them. The thing with the uranium is they used 20,000 times as much energy like coal, gas, and oil to extract the kilogram of uranium. And that the uranium, of course, they're only going to use 3% of its potential. And this is why it's so dangerous for millions of years. And it's splitting atoms into the environment. And there's nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against the emissions, the radioactive fallout for millions of years. This technology also causes fear in the public, and they seem to be justified after Chernobyl, which spread radioactivity contamination throughout Europe in the early 1986. Another accident at the power plant in Fukushima has reawakened concerns about the nuclear safety. And this is a drugged rod atoms type story. Japan itself shut down all reactors immediately, and since then only 12 have been restarted. Germany decided to phase out nuclear completely, and other countries scaled back plans to invest in nuclear power plants or to extend the lives of the disease factories. And this is a couple of YouTubers, right, that went into the reactor 4 control room after 7 years. Nobody's been there since either. And they show these pictures as if that somehow is a good attribute to the nuclear industry without no backstory to it, right? According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, who says Fukushima didn't melt down, that Fukushima didn't blow up, that Fukushima didn't have any bad attributes, that nothing got out of Fukushima. And so I'm reading this journal like this, and at this point I still don't know Rod Adams is the author of this story. He's a capitalist investor now. A venture capitalist, and he gives money to the small modular reactor and the new nuclear startups. And I'm sure he's working hand in hand with entities in the energy agencies and the government. Interest in this sector seems to be growing again elsewhere. Well, it's just you're bombarding the entire planet with a propaganda of small modular reactors, but it's not working. We don't see people out there rallying for small modular reactors or large ones. In part, developed countries are looking for ways to meet the emissions reduction targets under the Paris Agreement. And the Paris Agreement was about promoting nuclear. Right? Unelected bureaucrats getting together with the United Nations and conspiring to promote nuclear as emission reductions. It still won't come to fruition, hasn't come to fruition. And the Paris Agreement, of course, is one of the worst things could happen to a planet, was these people. They really are the worst things can happen. You can't have a future with this organization. With the 2024 projected to be the hottest year on record, yeah, every year post-Fukushima, all the adverse events we're seeing post-Fukushima, we've never seen pre-Fukushima. So then what's the catalyst? the pressure to reduce carbon emissions is caused by the nuclear industry. Trying to say that carbon, of course, carbon doesn't make plumes that covers the planet. Nuclear is the only thing that makes plumes that covers the entire planet. Gas, oil, and coal emissions, carbon, doesn't travel very far, and wherever it lands, it grows trees and plants and insects and biota and everything else. You can't have humans or any species. If you got no carbon, you have nothing on the planet. Carbon doesn't make plumes that covers the environment and pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second and attacks everything with replicating cells. And nothing with replicating cells has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. This is the Medusa Reactor 3. To reduce carbon emissions. South Korea recently abandoned plans to phase out its large contingents of nuclear power plants. Yes, and a few days later, the guy who done it wasn't because South Korea didn't abandon their plans. It was the latest, greatest, useful idiot, President Yoon, right? A former prosecutor, shitty one at that, who's now has been removed from duties because he enacted martial law to gain control of the country. And without him, there goes the nuclear renaissance, Rod. And France has abandoned plans to reduce its dependency on nuclear energy. Now, France just got rid of their third prime minister in a single friggin' year. So saying they're going to build 6 more nuclear power plants is just went out the window. Same as South Korea. And so, of course, France, 70% of electricity, just because 70% of electricity comes from nuclear. And where did they get their uranium? They caused a civil war in Algeria for 60 years. They destroyed millions of people's lives and their fresh water and their land in order to get their hands on cheap, high-grade uranium so they can convert it and use it to weapons. And they took the weapons and went out and bombed the French Polynesians for 12 years until everybody's sick from the radioactive fallout. And what they done to the French Polynesians, or like the Niger rather, is where they got their uranium, right? Civil war in Niger. They'd done nuclear testing. That's the equivalent of a nuclear war. When you set off a nuclear weapon, that's a nuclear war. It's the same bomb, same radioactive fallout. Instead, it wants to build 8 new reactors. Yeah, well, wanting and doing is 2 different things. And all that money now that was going to be allocated just went up because the current prime minister was ousted last week, right? And we covered it extensively. Recently, the U.S. government, a couple of people from the U.S. government at the United Nations, at the Constipated Party 29, and Bakuk just signed an agreement after they left to put nuclear power plants in their countries, and they had Rafael Grossi alongside of them when they done it. Like, this is despicable, isn't it? When he intends to triple the production of nuclear energy by 2050. Again, you can make these claims you're going to produce it, but there's no infrastructure out there. You don't have the employees. You're not trying. You never started. You don't have the locations. You're 25 years behind just getting started. There's zero possibility any of that's come to fruition, right? The White House originally committed that it will do that Biden, the White House. Remember, this is a Rod Adams story, so it's going to be very convoluted. And Rod Adams has a perpetual legacy of being a moron. He really is a moron, right? What he's done with his blogs and everything else, where he brought in the pro-nuclear and says it's like a banana in every show. We call him out hundreds and hundreds of times for years. He will do it on the sidelines of last year's Constipated Party 28 conference. And 31 countries agreed to triple the use of nuclear energy. Great Britain, France, and Japan among them. But none of them have the infrastructure. They don't have the supply network. That is long gone worldwide. This comes after it was agreed in the final communique of last year's Constipated Party 28. Nuclear energy should be one of the zero and low emission technologies should be used to help fight climate change. Nuclear is climate change. Radioactive fallout for 80 years is the reason for climate change. Radioactive fallout never goes away. It's bioaccumulating in everything, and it's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. That's climate change. There's nothing else that has the attributes for climate change outside of radioactive 80 years of dumping, explosions, emissions from the fuel pools. Every fuel pool is hemorrhaging radiation through the emissions, right, of splitting atoms from the used fuel that is still 90% volatile. But the hunger for clean energy doesn't come from government. Tech giants are striving to develop more and more applications that use artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence, again, relies on data. Data centers need constant, reliable energy. That's called geothermal. Perma Barclay Research Data Center accounts for 3.5% of the U.S. electricity consumptions today. A data center is using 3.5% of the Americans' electricity consumption. And that figure can triple by the end of the decade. That's a crazy statement, isn't it? Microsoft signed a 20-year contract to buy power for Constellation Energy. Yeah, but the regulatory agency said no, which will lead to the opening of the infamous 3 Mile Island. Well, we don't know that. You can't quantify that assertion. Said the worst nuclear disaster in American history. Like, this is absurd. This is just, that's the worst disaster. The Santa Susana has released more 460 times more emissions than 3 Mile Island. So it's equal to 460 3 Mile Islands melting down. Which was a molten salt reactor in 1959, right? But, I mean, what Hanford? Hanford dumped 450 billion gallons in the soil just in the 50s and 60s, not counting everything else they've ever done, which is equal to an aquarium of nuclear waste 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. And nuclear waste, where you take a liter of it and you put it in a wall at McDonald's and everybody walks in there, will die in 20 minutes forever. That kind of nuclear waste. And this is just a fraction of what they actually done. They dumped it directly into the soil and the Columbian River. In 1979, the reactor experienced a partial meltdown. They love doing that, eh? There's no such thing as a partial meltdown. You can't just partially melt down. It has had a 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperature, because that's what a meltdown is. It doesn't just randomly stop. It doesn't even need oxygen. So how can it randomly stop? Joe Dominique, the CEO of Constellation, described the agreement to reopen it as a powerful symbol of the rebirth. Really, a single building is a powerful symbol? How can a single building evoke that kind of connotation? How does that actually work? Anybody know? Remember, this is Rod Adams calling it clean. Rod Adams is just one of the worst criminals we've ever seen. In the future, there'll be thousands of documentaries on what kind of monster he really is. Google plans to buy energy produced by a handful of so-called small modular reactors. Well, good for them, but it's not going to come to fruition, is it? Geothermal is 100,000 times more appropriate. It actually exists. Just because Google was, of course, Eric Schmidt worked for Google, was the CEO. What does he do right now? He makes 1 million drones a month for Ukraine to strap a bomb onto and drop on conscripted kids. I mean, like, that's just monstrous. Can you imagine owning a company that makes drones, that chases people down, and when they're so tired they can't run anymore, then it circles them and then it blows them up. Can you imagine that's your legacy? Can you imagine how evil you got to be how disconnected, when like he had billions and billions of dollars. He can just live the most magical life he ever wanted. Instead, he chose that. There's evil and then there's monsters, and that qualifies as a monster, doesn't it? Rod Adams is a monster, that's for sure. Small modular reactors, a nascent technology that aims to make nuclear power easier and cheaper to use. It doesn't exist. Every day we see these fancy stories of something that doesn't exist, trying to convince people to invest in a technology that will never get their money back from. Amazon also supports the development and construction. So what? They don't exist. You wouldn't need anybody to support them if they were real. You do that just to get people to buy stocks and invest in something because they don't know any better, and they buy into the hype, and then they lose their shirts. And that's how Rod Adams makes his money, right? Stealing everybody else's. Particularly people that are honest and good people. Rod Adams has no concept of what that is. Combined with their sheer size, it makes them impossibly expensive and complicated to build. Hinkley Point is a good example. The UK's first new nuclear power station since the 1990s. 5 years behind schedule, 11.5 billion more than originally planned. It's a hell of a lot more than that. The original numbers were 7 billion. Now you're looking at 36 billion. Was the next number. Then now it's 56 billion, is it? All Rod Adams does is lie. That's all he's good at. He's exceptionally good at that. And if poisoning you by radiation was a crime, Rod Adams would never see the light of day ever again. This is not an isolated case. The newest U.S. reactors at the Volk plant in Georgia opened 7 years late and cost $35 billion, more than double the original budget. Small modular reactors are designed to solve the problem. Ha ha! It will be smaller than traditional reactors, using standard parts and can be assembled quickly, close to where the energy is needed. The Canadian small modular reactors are 24-story buildings. You're not going to assemble that close to the reactor. It's not modular. It's a monster of a building. It's 240 feet tall. It's half of it is underground on top of that. You're going to be using plutonium mixed oxide fuel. Some 80 different designs are currently under development. It's over 100, according to the International Degenerate Agency. And this concept is yet to be commercially proven. Wow. You got to put that in there because otherwise people realize you're just a monster, Rod. Among them is Rod Adams, whose nuclear capital fund promotes investments in nuclear technology. He's a capital investor. He's a venture capitalist, rather. Rod Adams, of all people. I was wondering what happened to him. We didn't see the little maggot out there in the last couple of years. Whose nuclear capital fund promotes investments in nuclear technology. Nuclear fission has a 7-decade history of diseases. It's not the safest source of energy available in any shape or form in any part of history. I would love to debate Rod, because Rod doesn't have a single foot to stand on. According to Professor M.V. Ramadi of the University of British Columbia, we cover quite a bit, it's a fallacy to think of nuclear power as clean. It's one of the most expensive ways to produce energy. Rod Adams, who tweets under the handle Atomic Rod, is a managing partner of Nucleation Capital, a venture fund investor. It's a non-traditional venture fund. There's the parasite there. I mean, for years and years, I have folders and folders and folders on this guy. He's truly one of the worst humans conceivable. He reveled in telling the lies. He would get people together for his blogs every week or 2 weeks, and he'd get a whole bunch of them sit there, and they would do these 3 or 4 hour shows, and everybody would be yucking it up. When everybody said it was like a banana, everybody would blow up laughing. And Rod didn't care. He would just keep pumping away. Being a monster comes natural for monsters, apparently. Nuclear energy former, U.S. nuclear submarine engineer, Rod, and there's dozens of them on each sub, shares his view on atomic energy. He's nobody special. He's actually just, He's special in as he's a monster. Long-running blog. Yeah, long-running is not the word. By Rod Adams, Nucleation Capital. I was trying to track down Rod about Atomic Insight. Show your support. Dear Greenpeace campaign, a petition to get Greenpeace to oppose fossil fuels, not nuclear. Think about that statement here. Oppose fossil fuels, not nuclear. He doesn't miss a single opportunity to be a piece of shit, does he? Marie Curie should be dug up and prosecuted for the crimes now that... And you can clearly, this picture, she still had both of her hands. Seated with her daughter Irene and Eva and Marie Maloney in the center. So that's her two daughters on both sides of her, and Marie Maloney is in the middle, and that's Marie Curie. She still got both of her hands by the looks of it. So that's before she won her Nobel Prizes, because she had never had no hands at that point, right? From the radium. Yeah. Why does being a monster come so natural for these people, I wonder? It's like they don't even work at it. It just seems to happen for them. Should the world ban all Japanese products to force them to stop growing food in the nuclear wasteland? Hell yeah, Dana. Bless your hearts. Bless your little hearts. Rod Adams, though, should be in jail for the rest of his natural life. He's really one of the worst humans we've ever come across. Here's the media. Like Rod Adams, even though these are monsters, Rod Adams is still 100 billion times worse than any of these monsters. And these are media monsters that are pretending they're 150 feet above the stump of reactor 4 to your left. That's serious monstrous, right? Rod Adams makes them look like child schoolyard bullies. What Rod does is unconscionable. Tetra Beckwell, a bill to help develop steady energy heating small modular reactors. Anything that small modular reactors can do, geothermal can do better, and at least 100 times sooner. And district heating, what they're talking about was the LDR 150 small modular reactor, and it's just going to produce heat. So if you want something to produce heat, then why not use geothermal? Why use stupid, idiotic, moronic reactors? A thermal output of 50 megawatts designed to operate at about 150 degrees Celsius. Any idea how easy it is to tap into 150 degrees Celsius with a geothermal outfit? It's stupid simple. It's ridiculously simple. So, like, what we see is anything but geothermal. That's what we see, isn't it? Anything but geothermal. And preferably something to do with nuclear. Anything to do with nuclear, the industry will back it 1,000,000,000%. All the media will come out and tell you every lie in the book to get you to believe it. But when it comes to geothermal, you got to look up the stories because you won't see it conflated. You won't see it in the same stories as nuclear. Drilling starts for geothermal heating at a Paris Charles de Gaulle airport in France. They aim to trap 70 degrees Celsius geothermal resources at a lousy 1,800 meters. It'll only take 3 months. It exists. It's not like these idiot small modular reactor morons. They got great education. They can go get a real job, but they choose nuclear because that's what scumbags like to do. The doublet aims to tap into 70-degree geothermal resources to heat. They don't need the enormous temperature, 150 degrees, right? They don't need 150 degrees like the Tetrabel to do the heat. They can do it at 70 degrees. And they can do it right away, in 3 months. The project demonstrates the ability of geothermal energy to meet the industry's decarbonation needs. Period. Shut the fuck up. There you go. Geothermal energy are key solutions for the energy transition. Spokane doesn't want feds to truck nuclear waste through the city. Mayor Lisa Brown is calling for a study to assess the risk of transporting 2,000 gallons of radioactive liquids from Hanford to Utah and Texas via I-90. Like, these are scumbags to the nuclear community. Spokane Mayor Lisa Brown first learned through the grapevine about the federal government's plan to ship radioactive waste through her city. And then the gamma shines, the neutron bombardment, the beta rays, the X-rays, for the pedestrians and the traffic, is multiple X-rays. If you're driving 60 miles per hour one way and they're driving 60 miles per hour the other way, you're getting equivalent to multiple chest X-rays when they pass you. And the waste we're talking about is all splitting atoms on top of that, so everything is vented. Spokane County Commissioner Amber belongs to the Hanford Advisory Board, so the least likely person to trust. The Umatilla Indian Reservation has rejected a plan to ship 2,000 gallons. That was the trial run, 2,000 gallons of liquid radioactive waste from Hanford through the northeastern Oregon to Utah, Texas, where the waste will be grouted for permanent storage. Why take it out of Hanford? Why not just grout it at Hanford? That's all they're really good at there anyways, grouting, you know? So the federal government now planning to ship the nuclear waste through Spokane instead. And would be the test bed initiative. They got names and acronyms for every scam that they want to pull, don't they? An experimental gouting project at Hanford. Experimental gouting project. Environmental service company Permafix is experimenting. Like, calling them an environmental service company is absurd. Anything to do with nuclear, the word environmental services doesn't apply, because we've never seen one that's actually honest, right? In grout, where you grout it, like you just solidify it in grout, basically, right? The gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the X-rays, the alpha shines are causing this what's known as a Wigner effect. It breaks down the integrity. It doesn't matter if you put it in solid steel. It doesn't matter glass. It doesn't matter what you use. It's going to break it down. Within 10, 20 years, it'll be incredibly fragile. Like, all their solutions have nothing to do with real solutions. They're not trying to come up with solutions. They're just, They done one test run in 2017, 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So 7 years later, they want to do another test. Big money, right? And bring it to Texas. Why not just do it? Like, Hanford's 585 square friggin' miles. And now they want to put a fuel fabrication facility at Hanford. I noticed. I didn't get to that story tonight. That'll be tomorrow. Showed up just before we went live, and I was like, oh, great. It's my first story tomorrow night. The waste comes from 56 million gallons of radioactive flute and sludge in 177 underground leak-prone tanks. They're not leak-prone. You put fuel down in the tanks Then when they got together on the bottom, they started a chain reaction and burnt a hole through the bottom of the tanks. But the 56 million gallons is part of the, and so that's the distraction. Well, there's 56 million gallons. We got to deal with it, Dana. And there's 177 300,000 gallon tanks. And what's going on is they actually dumped 1.4 million of those same 300,000 gallon tanks directly into the soil. 1.4 million. They're not trying to get that back. They're not trying to find out how much of that is left down there. They're not trying to deal with that. They got everybody, and they spent $18 billion just on a glassification facility that once you turn it on, you can never get in the building. And it flopped, and it took them like 30 years to build it. It never got used. They just stole the money, see? So the 56 million gallons is a fraction of the 450 billion gallons they dumped in the soil, which is equal to a 6-foot wide aquarium nuclear waste, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. They're not trying to get that back. Most of this has already gone deep into the earth too because you can't contain it. And this is the distraction, see? Worry about this. Don't worry about the fact that they dumped 1.4 million of these 300,000 gallon tanks directly into the soil. Don't worry about that. Worry about the 177 tanks. Over its lifespan, nuclear production, I dug this story up, discharged 450 billion gallons. Not over its lifespan, but that was in 2 decades. The first 2 decades during the Manhattan projects. 450 billion gallons of radioactive liquid into the soil. It was radioactive sludge that went through a chain reaction. So it's splitting atoms. Today, 200 square miles of the aquifers beneath Hanford is contaminated. 585 square miles is contaminated. And 53 million gallons of radioactive chemically hazardous waste remains stored in 177 leaky, I hate the word leaky. In addition, Hanford has approximately 25 million cubic feet, 750,000 cubic meters of buried solid waste, spent nuclear fuel, and even leftover plutonium. And then every company that works there is part of the legacy nuclear industry and no intentions of coming up with solutions because they don't make money on solutions. And they're not interested, and they can't anyway. It's like there should be a contest with thousands of universities to come up with a solution. But the minute you do that, then everybody's going to hate nuclear worldwide forever, right? 450 billion gallons of radioactive liquid into the soil. So it's a wall of 1 ton bags of deadly radioactive waste by the liter, with 1,000 liters per bag, so 6 feet wide by 6 feet, 518 feet tall around the entire planet Earth. And you can guess that the Soviet Union, China, India, many other countries could and would have created similar nuclear waste. And that the Fukushima nuclear reactors and nuclear fuel pool meltdowns was the tipping point for our nuclear power plants assassinating planet Earth. Grouting, which is the most idiotic thing conceivable, for making Hanford's nuclear waste inert. You can't make nuclear waste inert. It has to happen on its own over 1 billion years. Like lying is a perpetual lies doesn't make it right. A finding of no significant impact along the trucking route is completely dishonest and disingenuous. And it's a prelude to millions of gallons later is right. And then suggesting they're going to remove the cesium as if cesium's the only radioactive isotope. The biggest byproduct in that is going to be the curium isotopes. And Greenland continues product diversification strategy with additional homeland security and health safety products offering. Lies and lies. The lies the nuclear industry told me. It's really something, isn't it? That's what they do 24 hours a day. They're dedicated perpetual lawyers. Like this guy. Dedicated perpetual lawyers. Bear with me. You can't keep up with the laws. I try. I can't keep up with it. Uranium producer profits soar as nuclear energy demand rises. There is no nuclear energy demand. Right? Every year during this time there's a big push to trick people into investing in nuclear, because there's no other way they're going to get someone to invest in nuclear if they don't trick them, right? And like Sprout uranium miners, what Sprout done was bought the physical uranium stocks, the 308, like just the stuff that came out of the mines, to refined, and that made a temporary demand for miners to produce more. Now Sprout didn't sell it, they didn't take possession of it, they bought it and left it where it was. It wasn't for sale. And at that time, uranium was around $35. It was a couple of years ago. Uranium was around $35 a pound. And you need around $60 a pound to break even for the miners. So by doing that, they created this artificial demand, so-called, for raw uranium. Yellow cake, right? Before it goes through a chain reaction. Because they got two different types of yellow cake. One went through a chain reaction, one that doesn't go through a chain reaction from the mine, right? And they conflate them two so that, and they'll come out with a story about yellow cake, talking about nuclear waste and calling it yellow cake. And then when you get into the comment sections, you'll see that pro-nuclear trolls in there saying, "Go on, that hasn't even gone through a chain reaction." It's very confusing for those who are not astute on the subject, right? So Sprout Uranium was just this company that popped up with a couple of $1 billion, bought all the physical uranium, kept it where it was to originally, and created an artificial. And then the stock market starts saying, buy, because all the miners are going back to work. There's a big push right now, and stocks are rising. And they were, right? But it was all completely artificially inflated. It's a Ponzi scheme in every sense of the word, in every right to the letter. And that's been going on now for about 3 years. And they raised the prices up, and now you see every 2 weeks you'll see this pump and dump, piggybacking off this initial little boot, right? This is how they done it, was through Sprout Uranium stocks. They're disgusting maggots, these people. Super hot rock energy could power geothermal systems anywhere. Geothermal energy holds the potential to provide abundant renewable energy at equivalent costs to the fossil fuel. And targeted investments could quickly speed its development, but everybody's being redirected to the non-existent small modular reactors instead of the geothermal. If geothermal was getting the same money as any of the small modular reactors, it'd be game over for the nuclear, gas, oil, and coal too. Next generation technologies seek to make geothermal energy possible almost anywhere by drilling deeper into the earth. Geothermal systems could access super hot rock energy heated to 374 degrees Celsius or hotter. And you're good to go for 100 years. There's no toxicity. And it's very low. You only need a couple of dozen employees. You don't have to hire 5,000 employees. You don't got to bring in thousands of people every 14 months to change fuel. It's just turnkey operation. It's way more. You don't need commodities. It's just recirculating water over and over and over the same water. You don't have to store it for 1 billion years. It's not splitting atoms and killing everything. I mean, existing research suggests 2% of the geothermal energy within 3 to 10 kilometers of the Earth's surface could provide the equivalent of 2,000 times the current energy demand of the United States. 2,000 times within 3 to 10 kilometers of the Earth's surface. 2%. Why are we looking at anything but geothermal? Because the nuclear industry will scuttle and throttle anything out there that's competition. Because they know they're dying and they'll take every species with them rather than give up a nickel. Geothermal energy can offer an inexhaustible, always available source of clean energy. Small nuclear reactors are gaining traction around the globe. When you got Felicity Bradstock there, that's how she makes her money. She didn't write the article. None of them writes these articles. Nuclear industry, people like Rod Adam writes the article, and they give it to these disgusting journalists who put their names on it, and that's how they make their money. They build up an audience of fluff, and then they feed them this stuff. Small modular reactors offer several advantages over traditional nuclear reactors, including smaller size and lower cost. No, they don't. They don't exist. Not even on paper. And faster construction time. They don't exist. You don't even have an application into the regulatory agency. It's the most dishonest thing to suggest that they have any attributes when they don't even exist. Ottawa commits $2 million to geothermal. And how many billions are they committing to the nuclear, small modular reactors that don't exist? But only allows you $2 million for geothermal. Quatsi Energy, which is one of the best ideas out there for geothermal, and Nevada Gold Mine partners in deep geothermal pilot plant to decarbonize mines. Quatsi Energy, what they're going to do is they're basically going to evaporate the rocks. So instead of using up drill bits over and over and over, the deeper they go, they can just use MIT, they're an MIT spin-off, right? And they're going to evaporate the rocks down to the depth they need to go. And they just mass produce these systems and they can have geothermal everywhere. There's no limit. Nano Nuclear, leading advanced nuclear energy technology company, is not an advanced nuclear energy technology company. It doesn't have any nuclear at all. It doesn't have any commodity, any products whatsoever. None in the pipeline either. E2E Energy secures patents for breakthrough geothermal technology in Canada, United States. Turkey's geothermal project receives $30 million in funding loans. Nuclear industry doesn't get loans. They just throw billions of dollars at it, or they rob all the investors. Artificial intelligence companies are going nuclear. Here are 3 energy stocks you should know that you should run away from. The motley fools. Anything to do with motley fools, you're going to lose your money. Every single time, too. Without exceptions on top of that. And yet they're still in business, aren't they? The surge in artificial intelligence led many companies to urgently reassess their energy strategies. Relying solely on renewable sources isn't enough right now to meet these escalating and competing needs. Well, geothermal wouldn't it? Renewable sources exist, but small modular reactors don't. So why are you talking about small modular reactors? Renewable exists. One of the more promising developments in nuclear energy is small modular reactors, new scale power. And new scale, of course, are in a massive lawsuit from the investors against them. Right, they teamed up with South Korea after investors bailed on them and took them to court. Like, and they really are like the scumbags of the scumbags. They're perpetual scumbags. Relying solely on renewable sources isn't enough. What about geothermal? Right now, well, small modular reactors don't exist right now. Renewables do. And you're not going to build one of them right now either, small modular reactors. Like they're just scumbags. I got stronger words I would like to do, but a modular, scalable approach to nuclear energy. It is important to note the deployment of small modular reactor technology is still years away. Still decades and decades away. Not years away, decades and decades and decades away. They could be operational by 2029 if all goes according to schedule. They don't have a schedule. They don't have an application into the regulatory agency. And this is NASDAQ on top of that, which is the stock exchange pushing a product that doesn't exist. What do you think is going on? Insiders trading? Or just absolute corruption? 100% corruption, right? Like Fukushima existed. And it's never going to go away. The emissions from Fukushima are never going to stop. The planet was buried in radioactive fallout, and the reactors are still melting down. That's a fact, and the documentation of it showing up are facts. And the harm from this are catastrophic. And the fact that they went out and pretended they were in a building that don't exist is the very reason you should run away from nuclear. Because they're willing to do that, and they're not doing that for something to do. They're doing it because of the adverse side effects are catastrophic, right? Yippee-ki-yay. Should the world ban all nuclear products, all Japanese products, to force them to stop growing food in a nuclear wasteland? Well, hell yeah. If you're smart, you will. If you want to have a future for your loved ones and species, you better do it soon. You actually ran out of time. It's never too late. It's never too late to say no to nuclear. You got to say no to nuclear. You can't have a future. Your kids have zero possibility of a future with nuclear. Oh my goodness. I'm pretty burnt out. That was a good show. We made it through it. It's a tough gig, right? What we do here, we got probably one of the hardest jobs in human history, according to the nuclear industry. Being honest is the hardest job. See, nuclear industry can't do it. All they can do is hire people like Rod Adams and Raphael Grossi and the rest of them to come out and cut your throat. And they're happy for the job. And they're glad to get it. There's nothing they won't do for their idol, which is the nuclear destructive industry. We deserve better. Every species on this planet deserves better. This is not a game. It's not a game. I such a whip. I had a hard day yesterday, a lot of stress, and I just decided I don't care. Can't keep stressing myself out. See, I can take this industry apart. I don't have the support to do it, right? So we got the support to do things we're doing, so we'll do that. But it's sad because I have the ability to rally. You know, I have the ability to build a big organization that's effective, and we can gut the entire nuclear industry in less than 12 months with a big foundation supporting me. They can't stand an assault of facts. That this industry can't handle that. It can't survive it either. Everything crumbles right away when the truth comes out about what's going on, and we have the ability to tell the truth. We have the ability to demonstrate it and articulate it. And we've been at this forever, and we are never going away. And we have already severely, mortally wounded the nuclear industry. And their entire history is predicated upon deceit, and it's a house of cards, and we will kick the fucking shit out of those cards the minute we get the opportunity. Because we have to. We can't have a future and nuclear. We can only have one of them. And at the rate we're going, we're only going to have nuclear, and that will exterminate everything. Just from radioactive fallout. We don't need a nuclear war. Just a perpetual nuclear fallout will eventually exterminate all the species. And Fukushima was a pulse event and the catalyst for the mass species die-off we're seeing worldwide. You know, you're looking at 10,000 grey whales emaciated, 10,000 humpback whales emaciated, 10,000 beak whales emaciated, and the list goes on in whales. You're looking at millions of each species of migratory birds showing up emaciated. Same thing for the seals, the same thing for the sea lions, the same thing for all the species. We're seeing them just completely evaporate and disappear. And the research expeditions we've done quantify these assertions. I wish I just every second of every day I wish I could do more. I'm never given the opportunity, and it's simply the world deserves better, right? That's all I got tonight. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. We're going to play another one of James Lewis's songs because you can't beat it. You simply can't beat James's music. It's got hands down the best anti-nuclear music, period. He's gained 200 subscribers since Thursday. That's crazy, eh? Last week he had, last Thursday he had 1.62 thousand. Now he's got 1.82 thousand. That is insanity. I love it. It's so amazing to see that. Okay, but I want to play his Jamaica song because I really love that one. I love the Jingle Beckles too. That was crazy. I like them all. Don't get me wrong. But some of them they're just so good, man. His Meltdown Queen song is just unbelievable, eh? Let's close it with that song tonight. Make sure you go subscribe to James. He's always putting out music. He does all kinds of different genres. And we'll see everybody on the next one. Good night, everybody.
Jah guide us, Jah protect us in this land so free. From mountains high to ocean deep, we stand in unity. The mountains sing with the morning sun. The rivers flow, their work never done. But now they bring machines with fire untamed to scorch our land and leave it chained. Oh, nuclear Jamaica, not in our name. We won't let them turn paradise to shame. Protect the land, the waters, the skies. Jamaica will stand, our love never dies. Oh, oh, our love never dies. They promise light, but chaos hides. The atom's price pulls the ocean's tides. From Kingston town to Montego Bay, Jamaica's soul will not decay. Oh, oh, nuclear Jamaica, not in our name. We won't let them turn paradise to shame. Protect the land, mountains whisper, the ocean pleads. Protect us now from these reckless deeds. No more false prophets, no